So as always with the life stack build, my number one priority here is how comfy this build is to fight bosses on. You can throw an infinite amount of money at this build to make it do more damage, but the amount of damage that we can do with relatively inexpensive gear before I made this video is plenty. The thing that we are focused on is just being able to mostly face tank Ubers. Now you can't just stand in everything. There are some abilities in Path of Exile that are designed to just one-shot you, and this isn't some multi-mirror build that's going to be immune to everything. This is the earlier version that hopefully isn't going to be using any unobtainable pieces of gear, and I, of course, in a little bit, will bring the full money version of the build that'll do a little bit more damage and maybe even use a different skill. Now originally, I was doing some shenanigans with the Admiral chest piece as well as Doriani's on the Mercenary, but something that I realized is that this is a build about being comfortable. Bringing in a Mercenary that has to be near the boss, that can die sometimes because of Doriani's, is just not comfortable. So we've swapped gears into, once again, making this the comfortable boss farming character that it was meant to be. So if you're looking for a comfortable, tanky boss character that can stand in a lot of the bad stuff and can kind of just hold right click on the boss and let things happen, then look no further. So you might be familiar with my lifestack build, the Inquisitor, that I've played quite a few times in recent years. This is the Firestorm version of the character, and this time I have tried to make it just as good, but not using any of those crazy pieces of gear that kinda, forces some people to not be able to play the build. For example, the Timeless Jewel is no longer here. Mercenaries allows us to use a different one, and we're not using the Blood Magic Impossible Escape, which my previous build brought to like 40 or 50 Divines. So hopefully there is no unobtainium gear on this build. We're using a bunch of Fracture bases, a simple Corrupted Infernal Mantle, and then, just relatively obtainable gear here, stuff that you can craft yourself, and as always there will be crafting notes available. So what is this character? The whole idea behind this character is that we are stacking as much life as we realistically can so that we can use Wrathpith Globe to give us a ton of damage. So you'll see these two lines that say 5% increased spell critical strike chance as well as 5% increased spell damage per 100 player maximum life. That on top of a bunch of scalars such as Righteous Fire and things like Pain Attunement allow us to scale a ton of damage with one of the better skills in the game, I would say, for just stacking raw damage on single target, which is Firestorm of Pelting. We're also, of course, stacking a bunch of levels because of the other interesting part of this build, which is Infernal Mantle. So Infernal Mantle has this line that prevents most builds from using it. This has 100% increased spell damage taken while on low mana. Most builds cannot utilize this because if they are ever at low mana, you kind of just die. 100% increased spell damage taken is insane. So Blood Magic allows us to completely skip that. Now, I have messed around with a ton of stuff. The reason why this video took so long is because I tried anything from the Queen's Hunger with, some weird offer triggering stuff. We have used the Admiral, which actually does work, by the way. I've tried other skills. I've tried all kinds of stuff. We were using the Apostate for a while. And after doing all of this, all of these things worked and they were fine, but there was just these little tiny pain points that ended us back on good old Infernal Mantle. So the whole idea here with Firestorm of Pelting is that we are stacking intensity. And what this does is that as we stack up this intensity that you can see in the top left, you'll notice that the AoEs of this Firestorm overlap insanely well on our mouse cursor. So as long as we are casting and keeping this intensity up, we can get a ton of overlaps. Now, with our current cast speed and our current duration, we can get the full 12 Firestorms if we are hard casting in one spot. So this means that we're getting all of these impacts, it's like 90% of the impacts, times 12 of these Firestorms with, a ton of damage. This brings us up into the 40s and 50s of millions of DPS. And beyond that, we're stacking a bunch of life regeneration rate. If we are going to be stacking a ton of life, it makes sense to try to, stack regeneration rate and recover a big percentage of that. So between these three pieces of gear, we're running Vitality. We've taken all of the nodes on the tree that give us a bunch of regen, like Hardy, as well as this Brink of Death down here. We're also, of course, an Inquisitor, which means that we do get Pious Path. Consecrated Ground is going to cause life regeneration to also recover Energy Shield for you and allies, meaning that your Mercenary we'll also be able to get some of that regen. So that, plus a couple other things that we're running that we'll talk more about in the skill section and such, allows us to just be a tanky character that kinda, you know, has some options for really big defense. Like if there's a slam, like Shaper's coming in to slam you, you do have Immortal Call, and you can see that it lasts 2.38 seconds with no endurance charges, and we do get endurance charges. So you can use this, and you've got almost 3 seconds of defenses with this Immortal Call. So let's talk a little bit about the skills. Now, I did talk about Firestorm already. We are scaling duration for this. We take these duration nodes here in the middle of the tree just to get as much as we can. This does allow us to get that overlap. The duration of the Firestorm plus 12 Firestorms allows us to overlap extremely well. We do self-cast a mark. There just isn't really a great way to auto-cast this mark for us. We could do something like mark on hit shield charge, but that just kind of seems more annoying than just casting it. We do have a Stormbrand. We scale a bunch of generic damage on this build. So the idea here is that with Stormbrand, we can scale this up to level 20. I just don't have it there because I was messing with some cast when damage taken stuff, which is not good, by the way. We're using overcharge support that gets us enough damage to be able to shock some uber bosses for like 10-12%, which is pretty good. Using power charge on crit, this is our source of power charges, as well as culling strike to just finish off the uber bosses. So with this, you can just drop this down occasionally, and you know, they last quite a while because we do have a ton of duration. Other than that, we do use shield charge for movement, of course. We do have flame dash for getting across gaps, and then we have our defensive abilities. One of the main ones is going to be frost shield. Now, frost shield's actually pretty tough to make use of for most builds because it sucks so much of your energy shield out. However, as you can see, when I press this button, our energy shield doesn't move because we recover so much of it per second. So we're able to get up to this 4 stack of energy shield almost immediately, and we can cast it whenever we want. Energy shield takes a bunch of damage from you. It gives you some additional maximum hit. It does also cause you to gain some spell critical strike chance per stage, and we are able to get to stage 4 instantly with no effect on our energy shield whatsoever. Now, beyond that, we do have Enduring Cry. I use this sometimes on bosses just to generate some endurance charges if there's like a really, really big hit that I need to use Immortal Call for and I have to have endurance charges. Enduring Cry does help, but I really don't use this very much because our main source of endurance charges is going to be from getting hit. That's from down here with Inexorable. We are a block build, so this build does get a ton of endurance charges because blocking a hit is still getting hit. Now, talking a bit about the gear here, I did go over it a little bit, but most of this is going to be fractured rares, right? So the gloves, the boots, and the helmet are going to be whatever is the best armor slash energy shield base that you can get with at least like 18 to 19% increased life recovery rate. You do not need a 21% Divine Crown. I don't know why this was so cheap when I bought it, but get 18 or 19% of the best energy shield base that you can get. It really genuinely does not matter that much. Most of these pieces of gear are not going to have insane prefixes on them. As you can see, I just have whatever was available. I haven't like recrafted these to be like insane pieces of gear yet. So these are relatively easy to get with just some fractured mods, some essences, and then maybe a little bit of Eldritch currency. Beyond that, we also do have these 2 rings, which are just life rings. We're not using the delve rings on this version of the build. Don't need them. That makes the cost of this go way down comparison to previous leagues. And we're just looking to get like stats and some damage and some life on these rings. That's all we really care about. This ring was actually pretty lucky in getting like the Ellie resist and the recoup, but you don't need the recoup. You don't need any of that crazy stuff. These are just normal pieces of gear. Lastly, we can talk about the belt. I got insanely lucky with this belt when it came to the resistances on it, but you don't need all of this resist here. You can get it elsewhere. And on top of that, this is a relatively straightforward craft. It is just 1 socket resonators with life fossils in them. You just run that until you're able to get prefixes filled. You do a chaos reforge on the suffixes, and you're guaranteed to get some kind of chaos resistance. Then you just craft, slam something, and you're done here. As for the uniques, we already kind of talked about Infernal Mantle. This can get expensive, but the way that you go about this is you just get +2 duration gems or +2 AoE gems, and then you use corrupted currency to be able to 6-link this. It's relatively straightforward. This will get a tiny bit more expensive than it is right now. If you're just watching this video, you can grab this for like 30 chaos. but not 6 linked, of course, but it's going to go up. So you're just going to kind of have to accept that that's a cost of the build. Wrathpith Globe never tends to be that expensive, but it's insanely powerful. The Darkseer is a little bit more expensive this league, especially ones with +2 maximum life, because there are people that are using this for their mercenaries. But hopefully this will come down in price as the league goes longer and longer, and it is just an excellent item for this build. Now, talking about the tree a little bit, let's talk about the jewels first. So notably, I am not using the timeless jewel here that gives you immunity to elemental ailments. Because we're able to have a mercenary with zealotry now, we are able to run purity of elements. This is super, super nice for us because we ignore elemental resistances on enemies anyways. And the reason that we don't need those delve rings is because we are able to use Runegraft of Treachery. We don't care about elemental resistances on enemies. We don't care about giving them a little bit of vitality, and the rest of our skills are not auras. So this makes it so that when we have Runegraft of Treachery, plus these nodes down here, we do not need any delve rings any longer. Makes it significantly easier for us. So the jewels are going to be an immutable force. This is necessary because you don't want to be stunned constantly. I don't remember the number on this. You can look it up on the wiki. This is something that you are going to have for the build so that you don't get stun locked. We are going to be using a red nightmare. This is our main source of block, which I was talking a little bit about before. This is a block build, and we are at 78 block. This gem does give us a ton of block because we use fire resist tattoos all around here. There's some fire resist here. There's some fire resist here. This gets us a ton of block. Like if I take this jewel out, we're down to 58 block. Now, on top of that, we do have this other Aura Tempest Shield, which gives us a bunch of spell block. This plus nodes on the tree plus Tempest Shield gets us up to that 78%. And I realize I didn't talk about Petrified Blood and Low Life, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, as for our other jewels, we are going to be using a Watcher's Eye. I want to tell you right now, this Watcher's Eye is insane. You do not need this. You need the 14% increased life recovery rate while affected by Vitality, and whatever consecrated ground mod that you can get. Any of them that do any kind of damage are good. The gain arcane surge for 4 seconds when you create consecrated ground is actually particularly good for this build because we have no other way to make arcane surge, and arcane surge does give us a bunch of cast speed, so it is pretty solid. Get whatever mod you can. 2 mod is perfectly fine. Even just life recovery rate while affected by vitality is good as well. And then lastly, let's talk about the new timeless jewel that we're using. We are using a glorious vanity in the name of Doriani. The reason for this is that Corrupted Soul gives us 15% of maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. Now you might see this line that says 50% of non-chaos damage taken bypasses energy shield. This is actually a buff. This is actually a good thing for us because it allows us to take benefit from our multiple layers of recovery. So some of the damage is going to bypass energy shield, meaning we'll be able to use that life recovery instead of it all coming from energy shield first and having to only recover energy shield. We can recover both simultaneously. And we do have enough life where this still gives us a ton of max hit because the energy shield will be eaten up before the life is gone. As for the specifics of this particular timeless jewel, this one right here is kind of insane, and I just randomly found it, but ideally, all that you really want to get is you want to get one node with Ritual of Flesh. That's it. You just want to get one with Ritual of Flesh here. That's the best that you can get. This one just so happened to have like good mods on literally every other node as well. You don't need this one. All you need is the Corrupted Soul. You don't even need the Ritual of Flesh. But if you can get a Ritual of Flesh here and maybe a good node here as well, like Ritual of Immolation, I've thought about taking this, but penetration doesn't do a ton for us. Yeah, just try to get one Ritual of Flesh, but if you can't, any Corrupted Soul is perfectly fine. Now, as for the rest of the tree, let's talk a little bit about low life. So we do 30% more spell damage when we are on low life, and that does get used by Petrified Blood here. So Petrified Blood makes it so that the top half of our life bar, we do not take any damage to it. Only the bottom half, the low life portion of our life bar. Don't overthink this too much, but it is important that because of the way that Petrified Blood works, we have this unique mechanic that happens where you can get something called Overleech. So if we hide our life and mana reservation, you'll see that there's just a tiny bit of life there that's not actually taken up. Because we have this, that means that Leech does not get removed ever. And this gives us something called Overleech, meaning that we can proc our leech and have it just ready for us whenever we're going to take damage. But besides that, this tree is relatively similar to how it's always been. We're just going around to get all of the life masteries so that we can get more life, blood magic, block, life reservation efficiency, and that's pretty much it. We don't really care too much about damage on our tree. The only bit of damage that we really take besides like keystones and stuff is going to be this caster mastery here that gives us +1 to maximum intensity. Our skills do use, if I can find them here, intensify. So this makes it so that we're going to get another stack of intensity. It's going to give us that lower area of effect and also give us a ton more damage, which is really important here. But besides that, relatively straightforward tree. All of the information about this will, of course, be in the path of building. Now, as for the budget here, I do want to kind of address something when it comes to the cost of these kinds of builds. Whenever I do make a build, I can't control what's going to happen to the market. The best that I can realistically do is I can try to make it as cheap as I possibly can using gear that... I'll rip that guy. There's been a lot of rips today. The best thing that I can do is make it as cheap as I possibly can by not using insane gear. So what I mean by that is that there are certain pieces of gear that have kind of a set price in this game. So, for example, the Dark Seer is something that is relatively obtainable because it does drop from a tier 17 boss, so this will have a kind of set price. It's not this like very rare piece of gear that only I'm using. There's already insane demand for this. So if I search what this piece of gear costs, with +2/+2, it's 9 divine at the moment, 8-9 divine, right? So you could get one that has like +1 energy shield and +1 life, and then you could just divine it yourself. That's something that you could very easily do. If we go for 1 life, 1 energy shield, you'll see that they're like 6.3 divine, and there's a bunch more of them available. Buy one of these and toss a couple divines at it. Probably going to be cheaper, right? And then things like fractures, as long as I don't use insane bases, like you're not going to get a divine crown with 21% life regeneration rate. Fracture is just not going to happen unless you make it yourself. But you can get these kinds of bases, and you can get a little bit worse bases. It doesn't really matter that much. Or, you know, I could go and I could be like, all right, so you're going to need a specific double corrupted apostate that has these specific mods, you know, an unnatural instinct, a Nemus, this impossible escape blood magic, which is currently, I don't know, 40 divine at the moment. I could use this in the build, it fits, but I tried to make it work without this kind of gear, without these crazy kinds of gear, you know? Hopefully a bunch of you will be able to play this build if it's something that you want to do. I'll have full information in the path of building about all of that. Lastly, let's talk about the Mercenary. So this Mercenary is a different Mercenary from the one I was using previously because this Mercenary does have Wrath, which is not super useful to me. So this Mercenary that we're using now is another Fallen Reverend, but he is using Zealotry. Now, he also has Battle Mage's Cry, and he has this Reinforced Fallen Bishop, which is honestly kind of good. It just curses with seemingly 2 random curses per zone. Sometimes you can get, like, Enfeeble, which is super nice, but most of the other curses don't really do anything. Like, Enfeeble or Tempt Chains is typically pretty good. Wow, there is really a lot of rips today. This is like the 5th or 6th one that I've seen in an hour. But having these 2 is very, very important for us. Consecrated Ground as well as Zealotry just in general is super important for being an Inquisitor. And then Battle Mage's Cry does give us some crit. We don't really need it, but it is very powerful. And then, like I said, the Fallen Bishop. Also, another thing that I don't know if I mentioned in previous videos, but these Raised Specters of Transience are actually really super solid. These are kind of tanky, and they just, like in tier 17s, you can get some really good monsters. And then the Absolution little Sentinels are actually pretty good as well. Now, talking about gear, you do not need Crown of the Tyrant. This is just a leftover. You could swap this with basically anything else that you want. We ignore resistances anyways, so this is just added fire damage per red socket. That's it. And added fire damage is not that important on this build. But we do use these Zealotry increased aura effect ones. We are just using random resist rings at the moment. Comb's Binding is really solid here because we don't need negative lightning resist anymore. We can actually make him tanky. And then I am using a Zoph's Heart. This does make it so that we do have the Covered in Ash effect when nearby enemies. So this does give us a little bit more damage, and it's an okay amulet. And then the last thing here, and the main reason that I swapped off of the Doriani's setup, is that Garb of the Ephemeral just makes us immune to action speed slows. It also can make us immune to critical strikes, which is super, super nice. So this is super powerful, and it is expensive, but I cannot tell you how nice it is to be able to just stand in all of the action speed slows when you're farming Ubers. Like, Cortex has a, like, pretty consistent action speed slow. There's ones in, like, the Uber Elder fight. There's ones in tier 17 maps. There's all kinds of different stuff that just slows your action speed. This just makes you ignore all of it. It doesn't make you ignore movement speed, but that doesn't really matter too much, right? So lastly, we're gonna go ahead and jump into the path of building so I can show you what's going on over there. First thing about these POBs is that they probably will change over time as certain things, you know, get ironed out, people find issues, those kinds of things. So make sure to check back at the video to find the most updated version of the POB. But All that I really want to talk about here is that the most latest and greatest version of the build will always be here. We do have all of the skills that you'll be using with the correct quality and level and all of that. The gear that I'm currently using, any updates that I've made to that, as well as the Mercenary's gear that'll be in here so you can have an idea of what I have on my Mercenary. The big reason that you're going to be in the notes is because of all of these notes here. This include things like little tiny things to remember if you're having issues with the build. This will be updated over time, as well as notes on how to craft all of the pieces of gear. As said, these will be updated as I go through, as people have problems with the build or if I have new ideas about things that happen, so make sure to check back occasionally. But beyond that, nothing really crazy here. There's of course going to be some weird mercenary stuff down here, as there always has to be. So one thing of note in the skills is that if you are going to want to get accurate full DPS down here at the bottom, you are going to have to enable the zealotry. Problem is that because we're blood magic, it's going to absolutely destroy our defenses because it brings us down to 21% unreserved life. But to get the full 53 million, you do need this zealotry activated because this is going to be from the mercenary. So just do keep that in mind. But other than that, that is going to be it for the video. So I hope you try this out. If you're looking for a tanky boss killer that doesn't cost a ton of money, I do highly suggest this build. This isn't one of those like instant one-shot the boss builds. This is just like if you want to be able to do a lot of boss content and you want it to be comfortable, this is kind of the build that I prefer. So remember, boys, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.